Hi everybody, my name is Kassandra Priego. My research project is titled Parents' Perceptions of the Role of Parent Support Groups in Reducing Stress Caused by Challenges and Barriers to AAC Implementation, a case study. This research project was developed under the guidance of my faculty mentor, Dr. Russell Johnston, Assistant Professor in the Department of Communicative Sciences and Disorders. And before we dive in really to the core of this research study, I wanted to provide some background information. So AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication, and the broad general definition of AAC is all the different ways of communicating in the absence of speech. AAC can be divided into two main subsections. We have aided AAC and unaided AAC. Aided AAC is the focus of the study. It means the use of external support and includes things like speech generating devices, communication books. It can be an iPad with a speech app on it, and it can range from something that is high tech, low tech, or no tech. High tech being a speech generating device, low tech being perhaps a communication book on an iPad, and no tech being just as simple a piece of paper and a pencil. Unaided AAC, the other subtype, does not require anything outside of one's own body. So that includes things like facial expressions, gestures, and sign language. I'd also like to provide some information about who uses AAC. First of all, I like to point out that it is a diverse population in terms of cultural background, linguistic background, and disability background. So we really can't generalize AAC users. Some examples of people who may be using AAC is people who have experienced a traumatic brain injury, individuals with cerebral palsy, individuals with autism, individuals who are stroke survivors, individuals with intellectual or cognitive or neuromuscular disabilities. These are some examples. And it is estimated that about 2 million people worldwide use augmentative and alternative communication. I'd also like to provide two definitions that are relevant to the scope of this project. The first being AAC abandonment and AAC rejection. I'd like to point out that please remember that the focus of this project was aided AAC. So whenever you see AAC, please note that I am referring to aided AAC. So AAC abandonment is needing an AAC device, but ceasing to use it. So stopping it. So you're abandoning the device. Whereas AAC rejection is needing an AAC device, but declining it before even attempting to use it. So before going into this project and developing the methodology and the research questions and all of that, I wanted to do a literature search about what current research there was already available about what parents perceive challenges and barriers to be in regards to AAC implementation. It was a little bit of a struggle because there was not a lot of research articles available on this, but some of the things that I could find in regards to some stressors were lack of support, lack of training, physical and cognitive limitations of their child, issues with the AAC devices themselves, the cost of AAC devices, the time commitment required to learn how to implement an AAC device, with their difficulties, which was actually really interesting. I remember in this particular article, the way that they described this barrier is that the parent mentioned that I believe their child used some type of iPad with an application on it that allowed them to communicate. So the parent mentioned that if they were outside and it was really sunny, or they wanted to go outside but it was raining, then it was difficult for the child to be able to use their communication device outdoors. So that was a barrier. And then of course the lack of accessible resources for parents. So this was kind of my background information as I was further developing the objectives of the study. So to talk a little bit about why this study was important, first of all, I want you guys to think about a little bit about the power imbalance between a parent and a typical child. Of course, just by nature of the age of a child and the relationship between a parent and the child, of course, a parent is going to have authority in terms of decision making for their child. Now, I want you to think about that, but think about an atypical child who has complex communication needs, who is not able to, without the use of an AAC device, accurately express their needs, their wants, their emotions. You can see how maybe this power imbalance is a little bit greater when we're talking about a parent's relationship with their child with complex communication needs. So really, a parent holds authority over decision making in regards to the use or disuse of the child's AAC system. So parents play a really vital role in either the success, abandonment, or rejection of their child's AAC system. And also really important reason why this study was necessary is that there were very few studies focusing on support groups, specifically parent support groups, that parents who had children who used AAC attended. There was really little research and literature available on stress level parents or parent stress levels. And a really big one for me was that there was research lacking culturally and linguistically diverse individuals and families. So as I mentioned, we can't really generalize AAC users or the families of the AAC users. They come from very diverse cultural backgrounds, very diverse linguistic backgrounds. And I did not see that this was being represented in research. And also I do come from a family and our primary language was Spanish. My parents do not speak English. So then I always saw kind of that language barrier in my family day to day. So then I thought it was really important for me to hear the voice of a parent who might be facing similar difficulties, and to just make sure that they are represented in each research and that their voices are heard and that their concerns are heard. So those were all really important topics and reasons for why I pursued this specific research topic. So my objectives for this research project were, first of all, I wanted to identify challenges and barriers to AAC implementation that have the potential to cause stress. So I had already done a little bit of this in my initial literature search, but I wanted to hear directly from a parent. And then in particular, I made a really big effort to include a parent from diverse and different cultural background than what I had already seen being represented in research, specifically because I am bilingual, and I would be able to interpret and translate documents to Spanish. I was looking for English and Spanish speakers. Unfortunately, because of time constraints and limitations of the study and difficulties that I will mention later on, I was only able to secure one Spanish-speaking participant. So, like I mentioned, one of my first objectives was to identify challenges and barriers. My second objective was, of course, to explore their perceptions on the role of parent support groups and reducing stress caused by such challenges and barriers. And then my expected outcomes were first to provide valuable information to other AAC stakeholders like speech language pathologists on how to better support parents in AAC implementation, and B, inform other parents or primary caregivers who are maybe unfamiliar with parent support groups about how other parents who are part of these support groups perceive what's the word I'm looking for? Perceive the benefits, perhaps, or perceive the role of these support groups in reducing the stress that they face. So a little bit about my research method. I approached this through a phenomenology approach through semi-structured interviews. This consisted of course, interviewing the participant, doing a verbatim transcription of their interview, going through their interview and developing meaningful codes, and then transferring this coded data into themes, refining these themes, and dividing these themes into sub-themes. And now a little bit about the parent. So they are a female, their age range is 18 to 28. They identify as Hispanic or Latino. Their primary language is Spanish. They have a bachelor's degree. They have participated 3 years in their parent support group, and their child has used AAC for 3 academic years. Their child has been diagnosed with hydrocephalus and cerebral palsy, and the AAC system that their child currently uses is Adobe Dynavox app on iPad with eye gaze. So basically what this means is that the child's primary mode of communication is using their eyes. So if you guys can imagine an iPad-like, tablet-like device, and what this child does is through the movement of their eyes chooses the icons or words that they wish to say. So here is the interview guide. These are the questions that I went into with when I conducted the interview. I'm not going to read all of them. You guys can go ahead and pause the video and read through each one of them if you would like. But really, I just wanted to get some background information about how long they have been assisting their support group, who leads their support group, their feelings and perceptions about their participation in their support group, the challenges and barriers they feel they have faced, and things like that. So like I said, you guys can go ahead and pause the video and read through every question if you would like. So the first thing that I identified after the interview was analyzed was barriers. And there were 3 main barriers that this parent mentioned. The first was language, the second was parent knowledge, and the third was discrimination. So in the language subtheme, the parent mentioned issues or barriers concerning interpreter availability and interpreter quality. In terms of interpreter availability, she talked about 2 settings. She talked about the school setting and also her support group setting. So in her support group, she mentioned that even though there were interpreters available for certain workshops that her support group hosted, not all workshops had an available interpreter in Spanish. So there were some workshops that were only available in English, and it was really difficult for her if she felt that the topic of the workshop was something relevant to her child, because it was difficult for her to understand. And then also in the school setting, she also mentioned how it was difficult to get an interpreter or find somebody who spoke Spanish, especially in regards to filling out important paperwork or signing important paperwork. In the section of interpreter quality, she mentioned that she had experiences where even though that she has an interpreter, she has realized that sometimes the interpreter does not fully or accurately interpret what is being said in English, and that she perceives this as a problem. And it should be perceived as a problem. She also mentioned that when she has brought up the issue, sometimes what the interpreter uses as an excuse is the lack of time or a time constraint. And she expressed how time should not be an issue, that if it is information pertaining her child or critical information pertaining the services or accommodation or any request that she's making on behalf of her child, that she has the right to know accurately what information is being managed. Another barrier that she touched upon was parent knowledge. So she mentioned that, especially in the beginning, she was very unaware about what AAC was and very unaware of her rights as a parent, the rights of her child as protected under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So she said that she was really unaware, and sometimes this led her to be afraid to request accommodations or request services or request devices because she was afraid of the cost or afraid of what the school district or the school would say to her. So this was really a barrier for her, especially in the beginning, that she was just unaware of certain terms on how to navigate the school system and school policies. Another one was discrimination, specifically against her child, disability discrimination against her child. So she touched upon a situation where she requested a specific service or a specific accommodation, and she was denied. Her child was not assessed, but she said she was verbally denied such accommodation or such support or request because of what the people who are in a position to deny or approve the service or accommodation or request, they assumed that her child would not be able to use it. They assumed the competence of her child is what I'm trying to say, without an assessment. So they just said, oh, you know what, we don't think your child is gonna be able to find any benefit with this. So they didn't look further into it. In the regards to support group impact, we have three main themes: parent education, emotional support, and child advocacy. So in parent education, the parent reported that her participation in her support group increased her knowledge of her rights and the rights of her child. It also increased her knowledge of AAC. In turn, her increased knowledge about her rights and knowledge of AAC really contributed to her increased confidence in advocating for her child. So she mentioned that she was now able to navigate the school system with a lot less fear, and despite intimidations that she has experienced as a parent, she mentioned that she was now a little bit more confident and sure about what she was doing because she knew her rights and she knew the right of her child. In regards of emotional support, she mentioned that her support group was a safe place and it provided a sense of community. So she felt that she was able to go in there and voice her struggles, and be assured of confidentiality. And also just she felt that she had a community. She felt that the people who assisted her support group had something that unified them, and she said that also provided strength for her. So other notable observations that I made when I was conducting the interview is the parents' choice of words. So when referring to navigating the school system and requesting accommodation or requesting a specific device or just following up on the IEP meeting, she mentioned words like battle, fight, and enemy. And I just thought it was really interesting because it really just exemplifies the view of this parent about the role of the school in providing services to her child. So she does not view the district as a friend or as somebody who is there to help her, but she views the people who are in position of authority at the school to provide or deny services to her child as people or individuals that are doing everything possible to not provide her with the services. I do want to say I did not have an opportunity or a chance to, by the nature of the study, discuss anything with, any of the school districts or any of the schools that she has had these experiences with. But I also do want to also make a note that we cannot invalidate experiences if this is the experiences that this parent has lived through, then it really is a point of reflection for, all professionals out there who are in positions of authority, who are AAC stakeholders, to really analyze the way that we're approaching communication with parents and the way we're approaching the provision of our services. Some conclusions that I took away from this study were that barriers faced really are unique to each family unit. So they can be influenced, as we saw by this parent, by cultural and linguistic background. In the case of this parent, the language barrier was a really big issue for her. She, as I've been repeatedly mentioning, is primarily a Spanish speaker and has difficulty with English. But of course, we know that AAC users and the family of AAC users come from various cultural and linguistic backgrounds. So, it could be Spanish, it could be Vietnamese, it can be many other languages that need to be taken into account. They can also be influenced by the child's disabilities. So in the case of the particular parent, her child just did face discrimination because of her disability. Another really big conclusion is that although being part of a support group did not eliminate the stress to the parent, it did provide parent education, a community, and a safe place to voice struggles. And all of this combined contributed to their increased confidence in advocating for the child despite the barriers that they face. Some challenges and limitations of the study were, of course, that I only got to hear from one parent. Recruitment was hard, I think, because of the specificity of this research study. It really was looking at parents who were part of an AAC support group, and then also considering that AAC users are a low incidence population, and AAC, the families of AAC users are a really busy population as well, and considering the time constraint, it was really difficult to find participants. So that's some of the challenges and limitations. So now what, right? So I think the study really it is an exploration and really does send the message that there really is a really big need for research to find a larger and diverse population and conduct research in this specific topic. But also, I think it really brings up the point that we as professionals really need to reflect on how we as SLPs, students, special education professionals, educational professionals, interpreters, and others who are AAC stakeholders, how can we help dismantle these barriers for parents, and also reflect on how we contribute to these barriers. As I mentioned, we really have to think about how we as service providers are communicating with parents, how we relay information, and then also, what's next in forming, if you're an AAC stakeholder, if you're a professional, if you're just, as a community member, inform parents, regardless of if it's specifically related to AAC or not, whatever other area they may be struggling in as a parent, encourage them to maybe perhaps reach out to a support group so they don't feel alone, so they know that there are other people out there who perhaps are sharing similar struggles. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for your time. I would like to thank my faculty mentor, Dr. Russell Johnston, also the Honors Department Interim Director, Dr. Song, the Honors Department Associate Director, Dr. Stacey Malikote, Associated Student Inc., and of course my mom, as she was the inspiration for this project.